I think obviously all of us like want to do what we feel called to do or want to do what we're made to do. And it's hard sometimes to figure that out. Like, what are we made to do? What are we called to do? And that was the moment that I knew every other desire of anything I ever wanted to do in the past was now gone. And I had to do music for God and glorify Him and worship Him.
K-Love Fan Award, 2022 Female Artist of the Year, breakout single, My Jesus, Billboard Music, your album debuted at #1. There's all sorts of those things that we can talk about, but what you're singing about is why you're here today.
Absolutely.
And so we got introduced to you, Ann, because Laurie and I think we were traveling, we were overseas somewhere, and we hear this ginormous voice coming out of this tiny little person, and we're sitting at a computer somewhere in Italy, and we were watching the 2022 K-Love Fan Awards in another country, and what an amazing story. So at some point, we want to kind of get into it, but you know, why don't you pick the entry point into your story?
Absolutely.
Everyone's interested in knowing a lot about that, and you're kind of emerging as this amazing talent, but at the same time, very quick. And so some people are being introduced to you even tonight. So fun.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start your story?
Yeah. So thanks for having me here today, by the way. It's an honor to be here with you guys.
So were you a cute baby and all that kind of?
I'm pretty sure she was.
Do we have some cute baby pictures?
We've probably got some we can use. Yes. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, which was amazing. I grew up right outside the city with my mom and my dad and my sister and my older brother. So there were 3 of us growing up. And my granddad owns a farm in Kentucky. We have 700 acres. So my whole childhood was spent going to the farm every weekend and hunting and shooting guns and doing stuff like that, just, you know, on our property. And it was such a good upbringing and just was amazing. And my parents raised me in church. So my whole life I was in church and Sunday school and, you know, Wednesday night youth group and all that. And from a young age, I had a love for Jesus, just I think from being raised in that environment. But then when I was in 7th grade, I had kind of my first encounter with the Lord for the first time. It was the moment that my parents' faith kind of became my own. And it wasn't just going to church because they wanted me to, but it was because I wanted to be there and have that relationship. So it was my first day of 7th grade school year, and we had a new Bible teacher come to our school. And so I went to a private Christian school, so having a new teacher was something that we just never really had. It was like a thing. And so he comes in and he just started weeping over the name of Jesus. Like he couldn't say his name without weeping. And I remember just having this moment of realizing that I could actually have a relationship with Jesus. I used to think my whole life that God would just sit up on his throne in heaven and look down and just judge all of us and have, you know, all this judgment towards us. And when I realized that that was so far from the truth, that's when everything changed for me. And that's when I realized that I can have a personal relationship with the God of the universe. And that's such an honor, you know, that's such a beautiful thing. And so I went home that day from school and I decided to give my life to Jesus. And that was really when everything started for me, was committing my life to him in 7th grade. And I was kind of walking down a bad path prior to that. And then God really changed everything for me and started going down a path towards him. So it was really beautiful.
When you say bad path, was it like chewing gum in class and that kind of stuff? So, you know, and kind of spit wads and, you know, maybe shooting a dove or something with a BB gun or...
Totally.
By the way, I've heard it said that a fanatic is somebody that just loves Jesus more than you do. You know, so we look at people that seem fanatical. They just love Jesus more than we do.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
you had an experience with this teacher that...
Yeah, that really changed
showed
me.
You something.
It showed me a passion for Jesus I'd never seen anyone have before, and it was really special. So at that point in my life, I wanted to be an astronaut and work for NASA. That was like my biggest passion. I grew up just being kind of like naturally gifted at math and science, and I was horrible at like English and writing. So that just The fact that I write songs now is super crazy because that's not what I grew up doing. My mom forced us to take piano lessons, like did not give us a choice when we were kids. So me, my brother, and my sister all took piano lessons, and that was the extent of my music growing up. Did not sing in front of anyone, had no passions or desires to do that.
So no singers in the family?
We do. We have some cousins and aunts and uncles that sing, but no one in our immediate family.
Are they like a traveling group?
They're not. No. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
A lot of them sing at church and stuff like that. So
you could put a kind of family band together and have them travel with you.
That would be amazing.
Call me Auntie. I'll get you hooked up. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. So that was kind of my extent of music. And then in 2017, I was a freshman, just finished my freshman year of high school, going into my sophomore year of high school. And it was June 7th of 2017. I had been planning the day before on June 6th, I had been planning stuff for the summer. I used to do a kids camp that I would put on for kids in the summer at my church, and just to kind of have a week for kids to come and learn about Jesus and do fun stuff. And so I was actually planning that, saw my brother the day before then, went to bed that night. Everything was just great in my life, you know, having a fun summer. And then at 3:30 in the morning that night, I was woken up by my sister. She comes running in my room, and my sister is legally blind without her contacts in, so she couldn't see anything. And so she's like, "Hey, Ann, I can hear someone downstairs. I don't know what's going on. All I can see is some lights flashing outside, and they're like red and blue lights." And she said, "I'm gonna go put my contacts in. Can you go check and see what's going on?" And my brother, Jacob, didn't live with us at the time, so we weren't, you know, my first thought wasn't Jacob. It was just something has happened to someone. So I go downstairs and I see 6 policemen standing in front of my front door. And they just all looked very sad and just very down. And I started kind of screaming and yelling at them. And I was like, "Can you please tell me, like, what's going on?" And they all just looked up at me and they wouldn't say anything. So I remember just thinking, like, what in the world is happening? Like, what? I don't know what this is. And so then I walk into my living room, and that's when I see my parents. When I saw my mom, I knew that it was really, really bad, and something had happened that was just awful. My mom was sitting down on the chair and pulling her hair and screaming, crying, and my dad was weeping. I'd never seen my dad cry, and I was 15 years old. He had never cried before in my whole life. He was just completely devastated, and I just walked up to my dad, and the first thing I thought to ask, I don't know why, but I just immediately thought to ask was, "Dad, is he dead?" And he looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Yeah, Ann, Jacob's dead." And I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget the pain and kind of the shock factor of that. And if you've, anyone, you know, listening, if you've lost someone, you know how that feels. It's almost like this immediate shock. Like you can't even feel anything. You're numb all over. It's denial. How is this true? How is this happening? And that was my very first thought. It was just so sad and awful. But right after that, I remember hearing the voice of God speak to me very clearly. And he said, "Ann, are you going to trust me or are you not?" And when I heard his voice, I remember thinking to myself, like, I have to make a decision right now in this moment. Am I going to trust God, or am I going to lean on my own understanding to get through this whole journey? So I turned around, like right after my dad had just told me he passed away. I faced the doors in that room and I said to Jesus, I said, "Jesus, I trust you." And in that moment, it was so crazy, like this big weight just lifted off of my shoulders that I had been carrying. And I felt this peace. Like I knew that I was going to be able to get through this tragedy, that God was going to give me what I needed to push through. And even though I just found out that my brother had passed away, I had this peace that was just passing understanding. And it was so amazing. I'll never forget that feeling. So in the days, you know, after that, we were grieving as a family and processing it, and wanted to really make the funeral the best celebration of life. This was our last time to get to celebrate Jacob, and as his, you know, just celebrating his life. And so we, like I said earlier, we have singers in our family, and my mom and dad had called every cousin, every aunt, every uncle. No one was willing to sing at the funeral. And my mom and dad were downstairs about 4 days after my brother passed away. They were praying together, and my dad prayed with my mom, and he said, "God, if it's not your will for someone to sing at the funeral, then would you just take that desire out of her heart so that we can get through this, season? And right after they prayed that, I was upstairs in my room, had no clue they were praying. I come downstairs and I start playing at the piano and singing. Didn't think anyone could hear me. So my mom comes running in the room after I finished, and she was just weeping. And she was like, Ann, we had no idea that you sang. Like, what in the world are you doing?
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, Mom, I don't know what this is. I'm just worshiping God, and really just this kind of like, worshiping was almost like my medication in a sense. It was what gave me peace and comfort. And so she ends up asking me if I would be willing to sing at the funeral for my brother. And I prayed about it, and I felt like that was what God wanted me to do. So I got some friends together who played guitar and violin, and I played piano. We got together and we sang at the funeral for the first time. That was the first time I'd sang in front of anyone. And got up on that stage. I was so nervous, but mostly I was just so devastated. Yeah. And I remember having a moment where I was sitting on the stage and I was looking at all of these people. There were 1,200 people there. Normally our church, I think it only fit like 800. So people were just like standing all around in the back in the lobby. And so many people came to celebrate his life. And I just was looking at all these people, and then I was looking at the casket, and I was just so sad. And I remember hearing God's voice again right before I started playing the piano. And he said to me, word for word, "Ann, this is what I'm calling you to do. I'm calling you to praise and worship my name." And so I remember all these nerves just completely left my body. And I was like, this is literally what I've been created to do, is worship God. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew this is what I was going to do from this moment on. So I sang the song. It was the most beautiful, 4 minutes of worship ever. It was just pouring my heart out to God, and left the funeral that day, obviously thinking about Jacob, but actually what was in my mind was God just called me to music.
Destiny.
Like, this is the moment that I've been created for. This is the moment that God is showing me, like, this is what I've created you to do, called you to do. And it was a really beautiful moment. I think obviously all of us like want to do what we feel called to do, or want to do what we're made to do. And it's hard sometimes to figure that out. Like, what are we made to do? What are we called to do? And that was the moment that I knew every other desire of anything I ever wanted to do in the past was now gone. And I had to do music for God and glorify him and worship him. So we ended up making a video of that song, What a Beautiful Name, and we posted it to YouTube in the fall of 2017. We wanted to dedicate it to Jacob and have something to look back on, and did not think anything about it, was not trying to get any looks from Nashville or anyone in the industry. And within a month, it went viral, and all these people from Nashville started reaching out, and it was just crazy.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
Without you, we couldn't do it. God bless you.